From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capitol Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with WisPolitics here with the Capitol Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today, I'm here in the Madison office with my colleague Adam Kelnhofer to talk about a conversation he had with Representative David Steffen about the state's prisons. So, Adam, tell us a little bit more about what you talked about.
Hi, Kate. Yeah, we talked primarily about the state maximum security prison in Green Bay. That's Green Bay Correctional Institution, because there have been quite a few issues ongoing at that prison. This year, we've seen a several months long lockdown happening, and the prison, along with other facilities in the state, have been struggling with high staff vacancy rates for prison guards and sergeants. So let's just jump right into the interview. Today, I am joined by Representative David Steffen. He is a Republican from the Green Bay area, and we're going to be talking about state prisons, specifically Green Bay Correctional Institution. That's the second oldest state prison in Wisconsin, and it is a maximum security facility. So welcome to the show, Representative Steffen.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you on. So I wanted to talk about the Green Bay Correctional specifically because there has been quite a bit of news about that prison lately regarding lockdowns and issues with, conditions inside the prisons. There have been reports of rodents running around, of a lot of issues at Green Bay. And the village president of Alloway, the town or the village that the facility is located in, has called for the replacement of GBCI. So what are your thoughts about the village president's calls to replace GBCI?
Well, he's spot on. And just to back up, this back in 2009, so we're going way back in history, the state of Wisconsin spent 3 years having an independent architectural and engineering review of GBCI because there were concerns even back then. And when that report came out, it indicated that only 5% of GBCI was not in need of repair. That is a striking and damning piece of data that came out of that report. And unfortunately, what the state did with that is it shelved it. It did nothing with it. In fact, it didn't even report that report to the legislature. I came across it in 2015, 16-ish, and started to research this issue further and work to at least get an updated report done. So another sizable amount of money. We spent $600,000 for evaluating that facility and others. And it came back, as you can imagine, an even worse situation. The facility is in need of either $271 million in repair, or in the recommendation of the experts, it is to be replaced. So we've spent now 6 years, over 2 decades, multiple governors, and the structure remains the same or getting worse. And so it is time for it to be replaced. The issues beyond the structural and operational and architectural issues that you've identified are some of the symptoms of a sick facility. We are having lockdowns since June. There are issues with even the cell doors not locking. We have problems with HVAC, plumbing, you name it. And so it is an unhealthy environment. It's an unsafe environment, and which makes it very difficult to get people to work there and makes it difficult for people to live there.
Yeah, you actually brought up kind of another point that I wanted to make. The facility conditions do make it difficult to recruit staff members, and GBCI has been struggling with vacancy rates. Right now, they're at a little over a 40% vacancy rate for prison guards and sergeants. So those are the direct security facing staff. I was curious. So Secretary Carr earlier this year, in talking about the aging facilities, brought up Waupun Correctional, which is another prison that was built in the 1800s, that was built in the 1850s. Green Bay is a little bit younger, but that was still in the 1890s. So both are well over 100 years old. But Secretary Carr was saying he doesn't feel there is any appetite in the Evers administration to build any new prisons, which would mean, even if they did get rid of the aging facilities in Green Bay and Waupun, there would likely be no facilities to replace that. And I'm curious, have you had any talks with anyone in the Evers administration about actually going through with getting rid of the existing Green Bay facility and replacing it with something newer?
Yeah, and you hit it spot on. Is the Secretary Carr and Governor Evers, unfortunately and inexplicably, have basically said, I don't care what the science says. I don't care what the architects and engineers are saying. It is an ideological issue that is preventing those two gentlemen from making the correct decision on replacement. The state has 8,000 buildings under its control, and somehow, some way, this particular one isn't treated like the rest. Any other facility that received 5 of 5 failing grades from the building code inspector that relates to prisons, we wouldn't think twice about it. We have to replace the building, and yet, because this involves criminals, it involves law and order. Maybe you want to throw in some social justice, whatever you want, because you start steeping the building in with these very highly charged political, ideological issues. Somehow it's been considered exempt. And guess what? The brick and mortar doesn't care about the politics. And I can tell you that the inmates are concerned about it. I can tell you that the staff are concerned about it. And it should be no surprise to anybody that a facility that is that unsafe, that unstable, that unhealthy, that we can't find people to work there. And so, and you mentioned Waupun. I just want to mention this. Waupun is older than GBCI, but the years have been kinder to it. So the same report that was done on GBCI was also done on Waupun, and Waupun also has its share of challenges. But if you're ranking them, GBCI stands out above the rest, even though it is not as old. But as you mentioned, it's still an 1800s facility. In fact, once you get west of the state of New York, it's in the top 10 oldest facilities in the nation. So we are not talking, this is an aberrant situation that has become steeped in politics, which is unfortunate. This is a brick and mortar discussion, not a law and order discussion. And so we continue to fight this issue. And by the way, this is a powder keg. At some point, the two questions that have to be asked of the Evers administration is, why are you rejecting 2 independent studies that say that facility should be replaced? And 2, what is your plan when and if that facility fails? What do you do with 1,000 criminals in a prison system that's already overcrowded at 130%? Where do you put them? And until those 2 questions are answered directly, and perhaps in an interview versus just the only respond via statement at this point on this issue, until those are answered, I think the public and those who are interested in this issue should stay engaged.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue to keep tabs on, especially as the lockdowns continue. We know that the Evers administration has worked to move toward lifting some of those movement restrictions. They're calling it a modified movement in both those prisons, as well as Stanley Correctional, which is a medium security prison elsewhere. It's not in this kind of aging prison discussion, but the lockdown issue is an interesting one because it's been going on for a long time. Do you think there's any chance that we're going to see a full lifting of all these movement restrictions without, improving, at least modernizing Green Bay and Waupun prisons?
Yeah, no, it will not happen. And by the way, this is almost a joke. Calling lockdowns a modified movement. It reminds me of during the Bush administration when they reclassified torture as enhanced interrogation techniques. This is the same type of wordplay that's being done when you're being forced to stay in your cell, 23 to 24 hours a day with no access to programming, interaction, health services, you name it. Guess what? That's a lockdown. And so these individuals who are sick, underserved, in no way being prepared for release, those issues just compound themselves. And 90% of the individuals at GBCI will be released back into our communities. And so here we have this constant pressure and lack of service that's being provided to these individuals. And then at some point, they're just going to be let out the back door after being caged in that environment. So from a public safety perspective, from a state operations perspective, from a leadership perspective, there needs to be change made. I'm willing to work with the governor. He needs to put politics aside. I'm willing to put politics aside. And we work to find a solution that involves the closure of GBCI.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the solutions to the problems at GBCI that I've heard floated around the Capitol, at least for a year or so now, was to close both Waupun and Green Bay prisons and then build a new, more modern facility to take the places of both of those prisons, basically consolidate the prisons into one. Is that still part of any kind of these discussions to resolve the issues at Green Bay and Waupun?
Absolutely. I think that's the one that makes the most financial and operational sense, because you have to remember that, for every facility, you need to have a certain number of staff. But if you start consolidating, you start reducing it. In fact, just closing GBCI by itself will reduce staffing needs by 40%. So now imagine combining the GBCI plus Waupun and some of the redundancies that occur there with a single facility that holds enough for both of them. We can very easily even recognize additional savings. Only one set of boilers, one set of HVAC, one set of maintenance staff. And so all those things start to benefit the costs associated with it, not to mention all the enhanced programming that can be provided, the better mental health, the better opportunities for life and employment related services that they need. And so that absolutely should be part of the discussion. Now, that just increases the bite on this whole thing and the size of the decision and the costs associated with it. So I could understand if people are saying, hey, we've kicked the GBCI can down the road for 20 years. Maybe that's a little too big to do. I could understand that. But to be honest, I think it's the one that makes the most financial sense. Close them both and do one larger that holds both and recognize all the savings and all the benefits of a new facility.
Okay. So with all this talk about closing state prisons and trying to consolidate and figure out where to kind of get some savings and efficiencies, have there been any talks about possibly moving toward any kind of private prison in Wisconsin? I know we pretty much only have public prisons, state operated prisons. There's one federal penitentiary in the state, but have there been any talks at all about privatization?
So full privatization, absolutely not. Having contractors, private security guards, private operations, absolutely not. And it's actually prohibited by state law. I do not support transitioning away from that. What I did provide early in the discussion is there are companies that'll offer like a rent to own, where they will build a facility, you staff it, state, You still have your guards, whatever your policies are, they're your people, but you're renting our building for 30 years. And then after the 30 years, we slide over the keys to you, a rent to own situation. And that has some benefit only because we don't have to do the initial big capital outlay, and it's spread over this time period. So I floated that idea early. It actually saves the most amount of money because these big companies already have designs in place. We don't have to spend 2 years and perhaps $50 million on a design because they have them already. So there's savings that can be happening with that. I can tell you that people immediately thought when I was talking about a private building that I was also talking about private staff, and it got very convoluted very quickly. I backed away from even that discussion. Again, I'm trying to find the best cost-effective solution and one that still provides high levels and better services for those inmates and staff. But again, the politics got a little weird and sideways on even a private building. And so I've stepped away from that and said, okay, well, let's just do this traditional. We'll do the bonding. We'll pay for the architects. We'll pay for the design, even though that wastes more money. We'll do it if that's what it needs to get across the goal line.
All right, that makes sense. That is all I have time for today, unfortunately. But it was a pleasure to have you on, Representative Steffen, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for sharing that interview, Adam. In the meantime, if our subscribers want to learn more about these issues, they can head to our website at WisPolitics.com.
That's right, Kate. But for now, I'm Adam Kilnhofer.
I'm Kate Morton.
Thanks for tuning in to WisPolitics Capitol Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.